has always, I guess, impressed me in a bad way about the Bidens is, I mean, they've got the grift down better than few people in Washington, because there's 5 members of Joe Biden's family. We call them the Biden 5, who all in one way or the other have benefited from Joe's political career, steering government contracts, making other arrangements. He had, Joe Biden's brother, who had no background in construction, set up this construction company, and suddenly he got, a multi-billion-dollar contract to build houses in Iraq. Even though he had no knowledge of construction.
Wait, wasn't that a plot device from Arrested Development?
Are the Bidens the Bluths?
Yeah, that's like George Bluth. What the fuck? Jesus Christ, man.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to know whether the Bidens got the idea from Arrested Development or Arrested Development got the idea from the Bidens. But this stuff kind of goes on and on and on. And the Bidens, 2 things. It's widespread. There's 5 family members. I found a Republican senator from Missouri named Roy Blunt who had 3 family members who were lobbyists. So he got kind of close, but the Bidens have the 5. But the other thing is the Bidens globalized it, right? It's one thing if you're getting payments from construction company back in the district who wants a paving contract from your dad. It's another thing to be taking money from Russian oligarchs, Chinese state-owned companies. The Bidens have globalized it. The Clintons kind of started the ball rolling. The Bidens have perfected it. And that, to me, what's so scary about corruption today, it's not some businessman back in the district who's trying to make an extra buck. It's a foreign government, a foreign intelligence service, a foreign oligarch who wants to steer our foreign policy in a way that's beneficial to them. And they've got these political leaders by the short hairs because they've made them rich.
Yeah, I mean, it's government agencies of foreign powers with the stated goal of literally the stated goal of not just we want to make China better, but we want to make America worse is their goal.
Absolutely.
Right? That may seem like a small distinction, but I assure you it's not. It's
an important one. Yeah. It's an important one because China's been very open about it.
They have, yeah. They don't. I mean, what the fuck do they care? Now, since we're talking about political corruption, I think the stock market is probably one of the ways. Like you just discussed what is essentially anybody that's watched any mob movie or TV series over the last 30 years. Well, I guess 32 now since Goodfellas was in 90, right, or 91. Anyways, anybody that's seen any of these classic movies understands what a protection racket is and what like no show and no work jobs and all this stuff, which is basically what we're describing here, right? It's just the same principle that the Cosa Nostra used from the early 20th century in America until present, and it's part of the political class now. But the stock market is something entirely different, and I think people kind of have had that gripe for years, but they sort of woke up to it to a different level last year when the markets were able to just shut a stock down because too many plebs were making money off of it, right?
Right.
I think that was a big deal. Now, Pelosi is actively working as hard as she can against any kind of legislation that would ban members of Congress from owning stocks.
Right.
And it's
crazy.
It's so bold-faced, right? I guess I wasn't really shocked that I'm definitely not shocked that she feels the way she feels, but I was pretty taken aback that she got up and defended that position and didn't try to obfuscate it at least a little bit. She's like, no, why would we not be able to? It reminded me of Mitt Romney saying corporations are people. You know what I mean?
Right.
So talk about Pelosi a little bit, talk about just members of Congress owning stock, and we'll look at this report, and I'll read some of these names as well because the top 5 are Republicans. It's not just a Democratic issue.
Right. It's a problem on both sides of the aisle. And it's related to the rising size and scope of government, because the more government gets involved in healthcare, education, regulating green tech companies, regulating online companies, et cetera, the more opportunities there are for these politicians to have inside information and act on it. And look, there have been academic studies that show U.S. senators beat hedge funds, they beat the average American, they beat corporate executives trading their own company stock by a pretty wide margin. And the question is why? I mean, is it because these people on Capitol Hill are just so much smarter than everybody else? And I think everybody knows, doesn't matter what your politics are, that's not the case. They're trading on inside information. In the case of Nancy Pelosi, She's gone when she was elected to Congress in the late 80s to now from being worth a couple $1 million to being worth around $150 million. Her husband not only actively trades stocks, he does a lot of options trading, which is very risky, very leveraged. And he's got an amazing track record for always guessing correctly. And he basically trades in tech stocks, companies like Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, especially around times when there is pending government legislation that's going to affect those companies. And Nancy Pelosi, as the speaker, can stop them. So the one thing is the stock trading. The other thing are stock options, right? We hear about initial public offerings of stock, IPOs. Generally, if a company is going public, they will pass out that stock to senior executives, to investors, so-called friends and family round. Nancy Pelosi has gotten a lot of IPO shares of stock from companies when there's legislation pending that would affect them. And this is a way that she'll make hundreds of thousands of dollars in a single day. And the problem is, if you walked into Nancy Pelosi's office and gave her a shoebox with $100,000 cash in it, you'd be going to jail because that's illegal. But if you walk in there and say, hey, I want to talk to you about this legislation, and oh, by the way, I want to give you 5,000 shares of stock that's going to be trading a week from now, it's going to increase tenfold, there's nothing illegal about that. And so they're very smart and sophisticated in the way that they do this. And the idea that they should be allowed to trade individual shares of stock. I don't mind if they own, mutual funds or index funds or whatever, but the notion that these guys should be able to do options trading and buying and selling stock individually is ludicrous.
Right.
Ludicrous.
Well, the sign of good legislation is that it's clear, concise, and enforceable, right? Those are the three tenets of a good piece of legislation. And I'm not sure how you write that, to be honest, because you would have to ban them, their significant other, whoever that happened to be, their immediate family members. Like, the legislation to ban members of Congress from doing what you're talking about would be completely ineffectual because they would just use a cutout, even if it's just a friend or something, right? It would almost be like the straw purchase issue with guns in America. I don't know how you enforce that, to be honest. Like, it seems like it would be completely impossible.
Yeah, I mean, look, these people, it's like water running downhill, right? It always finds a way around. So there's no perfect thing, but at least we got to make it complicated for these people, right? I mean, that's the way that I view it. So I think we should pass a law that bans this. We should also, there should be strict requirements that you cannot talk about how legislation is going to affect certain companies with family members or colleagues. One of the big areas growing right now in Capitol Hill is not lobbying. It's something called political intelligence, which is basically former members of Congress going to their colleagues, finding out the status of votes, and then giving that information to hedge funds who trade on it, knowing how it's going to affect the price of lumber or whatever. So we've got to clamp down on this. But you're right. I mean, if we're looking for a silver bullet, something that's going to solve all this, it's not. The way we solve this or deal with it or limit it is by passing good laws, but also calling these people out by name. And you've got to do that. The kind of general, we're concerned about insider trading in Congress. You've got to call people out, explain how much money they made, and we've got to make people back in their districts care, which I think a lot of them do. But you've also got to have zero tolerance policy for people on your side. I mean, I'm a conservative, so I don't like liberal Democrats in there. But if there's a conservative candidate in my district who's doing this, I should not support him. There will be another conservative that will rise because no one's irreplaceable. We've got to have a zero tolerance policy. If we make excuses for people on our side, we're never going to get a handle on this, and it's going to get worse.